This is a reminder that if you haven't seen Rogue One yet, you probably don't want to watch this video because I might be going into spoiler territory, and I think this is a film that is worth watching if you like Star Wars. So without further ado, I'm going to get into my thoughts on it, and you can leave in the comments whether or not you agree with me. But yeah, let's get on into it. The first thing I'm going to bring up is the CGI usage within the film. I found it was incredibly well done, but I thought it went into the uncanny valley territory, as in basically they use it for Tarkin and they use it for another character who I probably shouldn't mention because I don't want to give away spoilers, but it's a character from the original trilogy, and essentially they use it to compose their faces. And Tarkin isn't a major character in the film, but he is in a few scenes, and I found myself being quite removed from the scene whenever he came on, because it felt like he wasn't a real person, which he isn't because he's a CGI character, but it just took me out whenever he was on screen. So I think it would have been better if they had just used an actor who looked like Peter Cushing. So that's just one thing that I found basically unwatchable with this film, but that's just a personal thing because I'm very picky about CGI and visual effects because I have my own experience with it. But if you're a casual theatre goer, you'll probably won't even notice it, because my dad actually, who I watched this with, he found it really believable. So he had a completely different reaction to I did, and he's just, a casual moviegoer who isn't really as involved with the process as I am. That makes me sound like I'm some kind of professional filmmaker, but I do have my own experiences with filmmaking. So, if you are someone who's invested in films as I am, you probably will notice it as much as I did. But yeah, I feel like the CGI was good, except for that one element. There were AT-ATs in the film that it looked really good, and the explosions were very realistic and they fit into the background quite nice. The location itself of the beach planet, I didn't really like at first, but I feel like they're probably trying to test the waters with new looking Star Wars places, so I can't really fault them on doing something new, because that's what a lot of people complained about with The Force Awakens. So I have mixed thoughts on it, but if you've seen the film, you'll probably have an inkling of what I'm saying, in that the location suited the story and the narrative and the context of what is happening within the film when it appears. I did like the desert looking, well, it wasn't desert, it was sort of like the Grand Canyon looking Arizona place. I liked how they had the Jedi statue half in the ground, and it did look like it would be something the Jedi would have made, but it was a bit big for the Jedi to have, I feel like the Jedi are quite humble people, so I don't know if they would have made a Jedi statue of that pedigree, but it did link in with the prevalent Force theme that's in the whole film. That's another thing that I wanted to mention, is that they included the Force a lot more than I thought they would, because if you have seen the original trilogy, they focus less on the Force in the first film or so, because Darth Vader, he's treated as if he's following this old stupid religion by the Empire officer, can't remember his name. They carry over that element with the blind character and his friend. Yeah, that's another thing that I want to actually mention. The characters in this film aren't exactly memorable, but they are memorable to the point where you do sort of care about what they're doing. Before I go into that, I want to talk about all the different cameos that are in the film. You get cameos from old characters that I don't want to spoil, but I noticed that there was a cameo from the guy from Rizzle Kicks, which was kind of surprising, and I kept telling it to my dad, but he didn't even notice it. But that was something that was weird. He appears kind of like near the end of the movie, but that cameo sort of did take me out a bit. It probably won't take out other people as much, because I don't think other people would notice it unless you're like really into the UK music scene or something. But yeah, and apart from that, I noticed that there was people from Game of Thrones in it, but they weren't really massive characters. They were sort of like soldiers in the background, so they're quite missable if you don't watch Game of Thrones. You could have just glanced over them. In this scene where the characters are in this rebellion meeting with Mon Mothma and okay, I'm gonna have to spoil a bit. Leia's father, I can't remember his name, the Organa guy. God, I have such a bad memory. He's they're having this meeting. I'm not gonna, like I said, I don't want to spoil stuff, but yeah, they're having this meeting, and Anderson from Sherlock is in the scene, and that was sort of funny to me as well, because he was playing an obnoxious character like he does in the TV show. So I feel like that was a nice nice cameo there that didn't really take me out of the scene. It was something I was like, that's funny, and then I just, got back into the film. The next part I want to talk about is the Darth Vader cameo. He isn't really... There's two scenes that he's really in. The first one I was quite resigned, because the way they handle the character isn't really what I personally think of Darth Vader. I thought he was a bit... I don't know how to explain it. He just felt off to me. I don't know why, but he just did. But in the second scene he's in, it's such a great film. To be honest, it reminds me of the comparison people have to Batman vs Superman, in that it's a bad film except for the Batman fight scene, which the scene with Darth Vader, that's sort of how it is to me, except that Rogue One is a better movie than Batman vs Superman. Let me get that clear. Following on from Darth Vader, I wanted to say that it would have been nice to see a cameo by the Emperor, because I think his name, is it Ian McDermott? The guy who plays the Emperor, he is still around today, so they could have probably easily have put him, in prosthetics and made a cameo with him with Darth Vader or something, but I suppose that would have... I feel like maybe that would have been too much as well. Like, as much as I wanted to see the Emperor, I feel like maybe it would have been a bit out of place to show him. But yeah, I would have liked to see the Emperor, because he is probably like one of my favourite characters, and he is the only thing that makes the prequels worth watching, so that might be my own personal bias coming into play, but yeah, that's just what I think. One of the things going around was the reshoots regarding Rogue One, and how originally it was advertised as a war movie, but the reshoots happened to make it a bit different tonally. And I'm glad to say that they did keep that tone of a war movie, but they did make it a bit lighter with some, banter between the characters, and the recurring theme of hope, which was a bit shoved in at some parts, because they say really cheesy lines like, "Rebellions are built on hope." And I found that a bit cheesy for my taste, but... I do like cheese, a bit of cheese, and this is a Star Wars movie, so it's not meant to be taken completely seriously, but yeah, again, that is something that can vary with personal tastes. Sorry this is filled with so many ums and ahs. I've just watched the movie, and I have my iPod notes open that I've just quickly jotted down after I watched the movie. Oh yeah, I watched it in IMAX 3D, which was amazing. Like, I don't like 3D, but if you had the chance to go see IMAX, I'd say take it, because it is such a good experience. Like, sit in the middle, don't sit near the speakers, because the speakers will kill your ears. Yeah, it's a great experience, so I'd recommend, if you go see this movie, go see it in IMAX. Yeah, gone off a bit of a tangent there. Continuing on with the movie and the tone, the scenes near the start of the film, I was a bit, like I keep saying this, I was a bit scared, because at the beginning, they kept flicking through the different characters so quickly that I felt like I had whiplash, because you don't have much time to really get to know these characters before you go onto a different scene within a completely different location with completely different characters, and it sort of jars you for the first portion of the movie. But I suppose they had to do that because they had to really set up all the different characters, and they did have a lot of characters set up, but I feel like they could have gone about it a different way with maybe not having so many jumps, because Jin was set up quite quickly and we had to get through so much of her backstory in such a small amount of time, and it really shows that they didn't really know how to communicate that, so they just edited it quite quickly together and like made one sequence of her history like a dream sequence, which is really stupid in my opinion. But yeah, you know, it's Star Wars, people want the action, so I suppose they don't really have a lot of time to focus on the characters, which is kind of sad really, because I did find these characters have a lot of potential, and it was sort of wasted because they were so focused on getting all the action scenes in, and they didn't really focus too much on what makes the characters and their personalities and their motivations. And yeah, I'm gonna get to that later, but in my opinion, the characters of, I'm probably gonna pronounce this completely wrong, but Chirrut, the blind warrior, and K2SO, the robot, they are probably the best characters in the movie. They are the most, I think, unique characters we've seen so far in a Star Wars movie, because K2SO, while he is the obligatory, you know, droid character, he had a bit of soul to him, and it was like we were seeing a different side of droids because he was working for the Empire previously, so we got a bit of, you know, context behind the way droids work in the Star Wars universe more than we did before, which is kind of cool. And he does have some funny lines, which there wasn't many laughs through the film, but most of the laughs were directed towards K2SO because he does have genuinely funny parts. And actually so does Chirrut, because he has this one part where I'm trying to steer away from spoilers, but there is this one part where he gets a bag put over his head and he says, "Really? I'm blind," and that did make me laugh, to be honest. It didn't really make anyone else laugh, but I just found that like much needed levity in a film that's so dark. Like, yes, it is a bit lighter than they originally planned, but it still is quite a dark movie, and it does have a dark ending. I'm not going to spoil it, but it is dark ending. It's quite a dark ending, so I'd say if you haven't seen this film yet, to prepare yourself, because it is quite sad, honestly. But anyway, veering away from spoiler territory, following on from what I said earlier, I feel like maybe there was too much action at some points, and I feel like sometimes they needed to just chill things a bit and take a breather. And this is a criticism that a lot of people had with The Force Awakens, including me, in that they didn't really have a lot of time. They had to fit a lot of things in a lot of time, and that meant that the characterization suffered because they had to fit all this action in that the audience would want, because if you have a Star Wars movie, you expect a lot of action. So yeah, I get that, but I feel like these films need to have more character to them, because otherwise you don't get invested in it as much as you'd like, and it sort of doesn't have as much impact on you as it could have, and so that would mean that the films aren't going to be remembered as the originals were. Like, yes, the originals didn't have that much character development, but they did have a fair amount that mixed with the action well, and the action didn't overshadow that character development either. It sort of meshed together with it to make the original trilogy. So, to be honest, when episode 8 comes out, I really hope that they take that criticism to heart and make sure that they add in the character development that they need, because there was an article saying about how they were reshooting episode 8 because they were focusing too much on the old characters, and I think that's quite good because they see that they need that focus on characters. If this franchise wants to have a long lifespan, they need to start thinking about the long run. Like, yes, pretty special effects and blaster effects and all lightsaber battles are good for like the short term, but no one is really going to remember that in a few decades. People are going to remember, you know, unique characters, journeys, you know, redemption, love, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I went to a bit of a rant there, but I feel like that needs to be said. Saying that though, this film actually does have stakes. Unlike the prequels, that shall not be named, because one of the big issues I had with the prequels, despite, you know, the terrible writing, apart from that, was that you didn't really feel like there were any stakes for, you know, Anakin, because you knew what was going to happen to him. It was like everything was already planned out in advance. You knew that he was going to become Darth Vader. You knew that he was going to somehow betray the Jedi and kill people. You know that Palpatine was the Emperor. It was kind of obvious. And so you don't really have, like, sure, you have that thing that they're going to get the plans, but you don't know what's going to happen to them. You don't know what's going to become of them. You don't know if they're going to make it out alive or if they're going to die. So you do have those real stakes as you would in a war movie, which I thought that it was quite good. I did find that the morality in this film was a lot more black and white than I would have liked. I had an issue with Krennic in that I haven't read Rogue One Catalyst, but I know of it. I know the friendship between Krennic and Galen has gone into more detail in that book, and I feel like Krennic was kind of a 2D character in this movie, because I feel like in the scene, this is spoilers, so skip probably about a minute ahead, but in the scene what he has with Jyn, I feel like that would have been a lot more impactful if he'd actually had some sort of conversation with her, like, and connected with her, because that is the daughter of his old friend. So I feel like they would have had a lot more to say to each other than what he'd said in the film. It was a bit of a bad ending to a character that could have had, you know, so much done with him. I was honestly so excited to see how they would go about having this character who was from more humble origins and worked his way up into the Empire, but it was just disappointing because they didn't do much with him. He wasn't really a force to be reckoned with. You didn't really fear him that much. He was sort of just strutting around with his white cape and you didn't really care because he didn't really have anything intimidating about his presence, to be honest, except for that white outfit. But yeah, Krennic was a bit of a disappointment. He was good overall. He was okay overall, I guess, but I just feel like he was wasted potential, to be honest. The same can be said with a lot of these characters, like Jyn. I felt like the Jyn character sort of focused on her father. It focused on her connection to her father and the relationship with her father. She didn't really have a fully formed character on her own. It was more of her connection with her father that made her important, that defined her character. And I feel like she could have been so much more than just her just being happening to be blood related to this character who makes the Death Star. You don't really know much about what happened between her going off on her own and becoming part of the rebellion, except in just one-off lines that she says to Saw, which are kind of forgettable. Like a lot of this movie, to be honest, is forgettable. Like, I liked it, but it is quite forgettable. It's not something that's going to be remembered in decades to come, because, like I said, it has nice action sequences, and the characters they aren't terrible, but they're not, like, incredible. But there isn't anything that stands out, really, in the film, unless you count, like, the cameos from the old characters, which I wouldn't really count, because then I'd have to count the prequels in that regard, and I don't like the prequels, so I can't really give this film a pass for that, because, yeah, the prequels suck. I also found it disappointing how, I don't know how you pronounce her name, Lyra, people could pronounce it different ways, but she was so underutilized in the film. You'd only see her in like one scene at the beginning and then she's just gone. And Jin doesn't make any mention of her again. The only person who mentions her is Galen in like this one-off line, and it's kind of disappointing because I watched this podcast called The Scavenger's Horde, and they talk about how women have just been sidelined in the Star Wars franchise for so long. Like, the mother of Leia, you don't really see her, you only really see her father, like, in this film. And the same thing is happening with Jin. Like, you don't really get a lot about her mother, you only really see her like once or twice, and then she just completely disappears from existence, which is quite disappointing because there needs to be more women in this movie, because there's just such a lack of, you know, gender equality within the Star Wars universe. I hate to be like raging radical feminist, but I just think that there needs to be more female characters in this franchise, because we are half of the population of the planet, and we do go see Star Wars, these movies, and we like to see ourselves represented on the screen, and it's just saddening when you just feel like you're just I can't articulate myself very well. You just feel like you're pushed to the back, like you don't really matter, and it's more about the men's story than it is about the women's story. So I thought having a female character in the lead would help that, but she's not really. She doesn't really define. Rey is a lot more defined than her, and Rey has a lot more to her, and we don't even know Rey's backstory. We don't even know how she got to Jakku, but we know like everything that happened to. Well, not everything, but we know how she was with her father and her mother, and you know she got abandoned. She was sore, you know, all that stuff. If I say anything else, it's going to be spoilers, but we know all that context to Jin, and yet Rey is such a stronger character. It's kind of sad, really. But yeah, that's enough about feminism and women. The second last thing I want to say is that Chirrut and his friend, what's he called? Baze is his name, apparently. I felt like their introduction was pretty good, but when they get in the ship with, you know, when they become part of the squad, you know, Rogue One, it doesn't really make much sense, because they just go off with them, and there isn't really like, the rebellion doesn't really question it. Like, they don't even think, oh, these two might be secret Imperial spies. They just let them be a part of this group, and it might have been something I missed, but I feel like they were sort of tacked on to, this is going to be really bad to say, but I feel like they were tacked on to appeal to, you know, the Asian market, the Chinese market, because it's such a big market that Star Wars hasn't really struck yet, and I feel like the filmmakers probably felt that they had to put in these Chinese characters who would appeal to the Chinese market so that Rogue One would do better in China. It's corporations trying to appeal to a bigger audience so they get more money, and I don't like how Star Wars is becoming that sort of property. Like, yeah, of course George Lucas, he did already do that, but I thought hopefully that I'm just expecting too much of Disney, but I just hoped that they would, you know, be less like the conglomerate corporation shilling money whores that George Lucas was. And I don't know, I guess I just expected too much, but yeah, as I've said previously, Chirrut had just so much potential. I'm probably saying his name completely wrong, but he is basically, I think he's force sensitive, but he is I'm gonna say he's force sensitive because he must be. He's a force sensitive blind man who is so invested in the Force, and he follows that religion, well, religiously. And I feel like he could have been like maybe he could have even been like a parallel to Vader. And this is just me just trying to speculate on what they could have done with him, but I'm not part of that filmmaking industry. I'm just a teenager in my bedroom talking about Star Wars, but I think they could have just done so much more, and he was wasted, really. This is going to go into spoiler territory, but I felt the ending was so depressing. I was talking about this in the car with my dad after we came out, but I just felt really sad after I'd watched it. I don't know, like, it's supposed to be about hope, but I just felt really upset. Like, the main underlying theme behind this movie is supposed to be, well, behind the whole franchise really, is supposed to be hope and that good can exist even in the darkest of places, but I feel like that isn't really, like, if I hadn't have seen the original trilogy, I would have been absolutely devastated by this film, because it just ends on it's such a low note that the last scene, that I'm not going to spoil, the last scene when that happens, it's supposed to be a happy scene, like a hopeful scene, but at that point I'm just like, my god, what's just happened? And it made me, I'm quite an emotional person, so I don't know, I guess that's just why this is getting to me, but, I did get what I want though, because of the stakes are a lot higher than a typical Star Wars movie is, because they don't have the whole trilogy to go through all the different characters and show their journeys, but I think it suffers because of that, because they don't have as much time to develop the characters as they would normally in a Star Wars movie, and so the characters end up being a third of the characters they would have been had they had been in a trilogy. And even though I've been going so many criticisms of this movie, I did find it quite a good movie. I wouldn't say it's absolutely legendary, but it isn't like a terrible movie. I don't know how the reviews have been pouring in, but I've heard that they've been mixed. I think if you're gonna be hyperbolic, as you say, obviously you could say it's the worst movie ever or it's the best movie ever, but I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, in that obviously this is just personal opinion, but there are good elements to it and bad elements to it, and obviously it all comes down to personal enjoyment. And personally, I did enjoy this movie. I didn't sit in the theatre and keep checking my phone every few minutes. I actually sat there and watched the whole thing without, getting out my phone. And I think usually I do that with basically most movies, but I think for a movie to have failed, in my opinion, it has to be at a point where I can't watch it anymore, or that I'm going to do something else while watching it because it's just so boring. And on that level, on that very low standard, I think this movie doesn't fail, and so personally I enjoy it. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I was debating over what to give it, because it was a 7 out of 10 when it came out, but then it went down to a 6.5 as I was making these notes, and then it went back to a 7 out of 10 because I think 7 is quite average, just slightly above average. And I think this is a film worth seeing. If you do like Star Wars, you'll want to see this film, and you probably already have, but if you're not like a hardcore Star Wars fan, I don't know how much enjoyment you'll get out of this film, because as I said, I do like Star Wars and I do watch Star Wars podcasts, so I did enjoy this film and all the different references and the things relating to the original Star Wars. I would recommend this film to general moviegoers because there is action and there is characters. However underdeveloped they are characters who are enjoyable to watch and to interact with each other. I felt like the dynamic between Cassian and Jin was a bit forced, but overall it's quite good. It's not terrible, and I'm really underselling this movie, but if you're just gonna listen to me over what to watch, I don't know what to say, because I'm just I'm a bit of an idiot really, but if you are, I'd say go watch it, because it is a good movie, and you'd probably be stupid to miss out on watching a Star Wars movie. So yeah, I think that concludes my thoughts. Well, this video is probably gonna be like half an hour long. I didn't even realise I was going on. I basically ranted. If you have any suggestions for me on stuff to do in the future, or how for me to do these reviews or thoughts videos, because I am kind of bad at trying to structure these. I was planning to do in like an essay format like I've done with my previous videos, but I thought it'd probably be better if I did it in a note form and just let my thoughts be free and flow their own way. But yeah, just let me know any suggestions or feedback in the comments below, and hopefully if you like my videos, stick around and subscribe, because I'm probably going to be starting more of these as the holiday is coming up, if it turns out well. So I'll see you in the next video, and have a good one, and may the force be with you. Bye!